Edward VIII was crowned King of the United Kingdom on the 20th of January 1936, accompanied by the usual pomp and circumstance. While royalists across the British Empire were filled with hope and a sense of renewal, Edward's reign would end just 326 days later, when he chose to abdicate and marry the divorced American socialite Wallis Simpson. That melodrama is a story all on its own, yet historically more interesting is what happened next. A series of events which prompted persistent rumours that Edward was not only a Nazi sympathizer, but was prepared to betray the nation he had once ruled. In the 1930s, approval of Hitler was not uncommon, particularly amongst British elites. The Nazis were seen as a necessary, if crude, bulwark against communism and Soviet Russia. Hitler was also an ardent admirer of the British. Most of those same sympathizers would ultimately be horrified at the colossal crimes that the Nazis would commit, but at the time, few realized the danger. Though princes and monarchs never made public utterances on politics, high society was well aware that in the pre-war period, Edward was a Nazi sympathizer. He also believed in racial superiority. After a 1920 visit to Australia, he wrote of Australian Aboriginals. "They are the most revolting form of living creatures I have ever seen, the lowest form of human beings, and the nearest thing to monkeys." After the abdication, his successor and brother, George VI, named him Edward, Duke of Windsor. Edward married Simpson in France on the 3rd of June 1937. All British royalty were barred from attending, and Wallis Simpson was not allowed to be known as the Duchess of Windsor, moves which Edward bitterly resented. He had also believed that after a year or two of exile in France, he and his wife would be permitted to return to England. The new king made clear that this would not happen. Edward was furious, believing that the establishment had betrayed him. In October 1937, as though in an act of revenge, Edward and his wife visited Nazi Germany and were received by Hitler at the Berghof. The British government were mortified, particularly when the Duke gave Nazi salutes. The Nazis, masters of propaganda, received them as genuine royalty on a state visit and scored a major public relations coup. Albert Speer quoted Hitler as saying that if Edward had remained king, then a military alliance between Britain and Germany would have been assured. It was rumoured that Hitler and Edward discussed scenarios under which he could return to the throne. This has never been substantiated. In a May 1939 interview on NBC Radio, Edward appeared to endorse further appeasement just a few months before war was declared. The BBC, likely under pressure from the government, refused to broadcast it, though it was reported in newspapers. As the so-called phony war of 1939 ended and hostilities loomed in early 1940, Edward was appointed a Major General attached to the British military mission in France. At this point, serious allegations of treachery against the Duke began to emerge. In February 1940, the German ambassador to The Hague, Julius von Sack-Burgersrode, claimed that Edward had leaked British war plans to Germany. The claim was denied, though the British government took it seriously. As king, before the war, Edward had a cavalier attitude toward secret documents sent to him by the cabinet. Simpson had been reading them, as had other visitors to the royal household, and they were often left unsecured. This was irresponsible, especially since American intelligence sources believed that Simpson was a close friend of the German foreign minister Joachim von Ribbentrop and was even more favourable towards Hitler than the Duke. Consequently, Edward had long been regarded as a security risk by the British, whether unwittingly or wittingly. There's lots more to come in this video, but please consider subscribing. Thank you. As France fell, the couple began an odd series of moves that aroused further suspicion. Instead of returning to England, they first went to Biarritz, then fascist Spain, before finally settling in neutral Portugal, at the home of a shady character named Ricardo Espirito Santo, who had inherited a banking fortune and retained contacts with various intelligence agencies, including both the Germans and the British. There followed a bizarre Nazi plan, Operation Willy, to persuade Edward to return to occupied Europe and work with the Nazis on securing an accommodation with Britain. Orders were given to kidnap him if necessary. Winston Churchill became aware of the plot and demanded Edward return to England or face a court-martial. In the event, Churchill solved the situation by appointing the Duke governor of the Bahamas. The couple left Lisbon on the 1st of August. Though out of the way, Edward continued to make occasional embarrassing statements, either about accommodation with Germany or about the people he governed. Further embarrassment ensued when it emerged that Edward had asked the Nazis to guard his French property during the occupation, a request with which they complied. Following the war, the Duke returned to France and lived the remainder of his life out of the public eye. As declassified documents emerged, mainly after his death, speculation mounted about his political sympathies and potentially treacherous behavior. So did he betray his country? No paper trail or intercepted broadcast ever implicated him, though such a high-level spy would likely be outside the regular intelligence loop. Some of the statements implicating him may have been an attempt by the Nazis to lower morale in Britain. Yet there is no doubt that he was pro-Nazi before the war, and he expressed, in the presence of others, his admiration for Hitler. The British and American governments were both very suspicious of the Duke and his wife, both before the war and during it. Until solid evidence emerges from archives, like all of us, he remains innocent until proven guilty, but his own pronouncements and behavior did nothing to allay suspicion, and ensures that his reputation will be forever clouded by the allegation that he treacherously assisted one of the most evil regimes of all time.